In this episode, we are turning Domain 2 into a spoken glossary so that the language of vulnerability management feels more connected, more practical, and much less intimidating for a beginner preparing for the CompTIA Cybersecurity Analyst (CySA Plus) exam. A lot of students hear this part of the course and immediately picture scanning tools, long reports, and technical ratings that seem to reduce everything to numbers. But the real heart of Domain 2 is much more understandable than that. It is about learning how defenders talk about weakness, exposure, priority, and response in a way that helps an organization reduce risk before a problem grows into something worse. When the vocabulary starts making sense, the whole domain becomes easier because you stop treating each term like a separate fact to memorize and start hearing it as part of one larger conversation about what is weak, how reachable that weakness is, how dangerous it may be, and what should happen next. A good place to begin is with the core terms that define what this domain is really about. A vulnerability is a weakness that could be used to cause harm, and that weakness might live in software, hardware, configuration, process, or access design. An exploit is the method, code, or technique used to take advantage of that weakness, while exploitability is the practical likelihood that the weakness can actually be abused in a real environment. Exposure is the degree to which the vulnerable thing is reachable or at risk. An attack surface is the full set of places where an attacker might interact with the environment. A threat is the actor, event, or condition that could make use of a weakness, while risk is the broader idea that combines valuable assets, existing weaknesses, likely threats, and possible impact. Remediation is the act of fixing the problem. Mitigation is the act of reducing the danger even if the full fix is not in place yet. And compensating control is a protective measure that helps lower exposure when direct remediation is delayed or not possible. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Another useful group of Domain 2 terms helps explain where weakness comes from and how it is categorized. A misconfiguration is a system or application setting that creates unnecessary exposure, often not because the product is broken, but because it was deployed unsafely or left with defaults that do not belong in production. A flaw is a defect or weakness in the software or design itself, while a weakness is the broader word that may also include poor process, bad access control, or unsafe architecture. Technical debt is the accumulated burden created by shortcuts, outdated design decisions, or delayed maintenance that make the environment harder to secure over time. End of life means a product is no longer supported for its full intended use. And end of support means the vendor no longer provides updates or fixes, which matters because unsupported systems can remain operational while becoming more dangerous. Legacy system is the term often used for older technology that is still important to the business, but harder to secure because it may not patch easily, integrate cleanly, or tolerate major changes without operational pain. A major part of this glossary also involves the language used to identify known vulnerabilities across the industry. Common vulnerabilities and exposures, CVE, is the naming system used to assign a shared public identifier to specific disclosed vulnerabilities, which helps security teams talk about the same issue without confusion. Common weakness enumeration, CWE, refers to categories of underlying software or design weakness, which means it points more toward the type of flaw than toward one exact product issue. Common platform enumeration, CPE, is used to standardize how products and platforms are identified, which becomes useful when matching vulnerability information to specific systems. National Vulnerability Database, NVD, is a major public source of vulnerability details and associated scoring information, and security teams use it because it provides structure and common reference points. The important thing for a beginner to remember is that these naming and reference systems exist so analysts, vendors, and organizations can speak a common language. Without shared identifiers, vulnerability work would become much harder because every team would be describing the same issue in slightly different ways. Scoring language is one of the most important areas to understand because many exam questions depend on knowing what a score means and what it does not mean. Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS, is the widely used framework for expressing the technical severity of a vulnerability through a numeric score and severity band. Base score refers to the core characteristics of the weakness itself, while temporal and environmental ideas help reflect things like exploit maturity or local business context. Vector is the string that summarizes how the score was calculated, and it reflects details such as how the issue is reached, what privileges are needed, and what user interaction may be required. Severity label is the simpler way teams often speak about the score, such as low, medium, high, or critical. The key lesson is that CVSS is useful, but it is not the full answer to prioritization. A score tells you something important about the technical nature of the weakness, but it does not automatically tell you which issue deserves the organization's attention first. That leads into another cluster of terms centered on prioritization and business context. Asset criticality refers to how important a system, service, or application is to the organization's operations, customers, or data, and that matters because not all vulnerable systems carry the same consequence. Exposure window is the amount of time a weakness remains present and reachable before protection improves, while blast radius refers to how far the damage could spread if the vulnerable component is abused. Business impact is the practical effect the weakness could have on operations, trust, revenue, compliance, safety, or service delivery. Likelihood is the chance the issue will actually be exploited in context, while impact is the amount of harm if that exploitation succeeds. Risk acceptance means leadership or a designated owner knowingly decides not to fix or fully reduce a risk at the present time. An exception refers to the formal record of that choice or of the conditions under which a normal control requirement is temporarily not being met. These terms matter because vulnerability management is never just technical maintenance. It is also decision-making about what the business can tolerate, what it cannot, and who is responsible for owning that answer. Scanning terms form another large and very testable part of Domain 2 vocabulary. A vulnerability scan is an automated review designed to identify known weaknesses, missing patches, bad configurations, or exposed services across systems and applications. An authenticated scan uses credentials so the scanner can see deeper into the target and gather more accurate information, while an unauthenticated scan examines the system from a more external viewpoint with less direct access. Discovery scan focuses on identifying what exists in the environment, while assessment scan focuses more specifically on finding weaknesses in what was discovered. Agent-based scanning means a small software component lives on the target to help collect local information, while agentless scanning works remotely across the network. Coverage refers to how much of the environment the scan can actually see, and scope refers to what is intentionally included in the assessment. For a beginner, the key idea is that scans are visibility tools. They help show what might be wrong, but the quality of the result depends on how much the tool can see and how well the environment matches the assumptions behind the scan. Once scans produce findings, another set of terms becomes important because results are not always as simple as they first appear. A false positive is a finding that appears to show a weakness but turns out not to be a real problem in that context, while a false negative is a real weakness that the scan failed to catch. Validation is the process of checking whether a finding is accurate and relevant enough to act on, and tuning is the act of improving tool behavior or logic so the results become more useful over time. Evidence is the supporting information that helps confirm the weakness, such as version data, configuration detail, or observed exposure. Noise is the excess volume of low-value results that can distract analysts from the most meaningful issues, and signal is the smaller subset of findings that truly deserve attention. Credentialed accuracy matters because deeper visibility often reduces uncertainty, but even a strong scan should not be treated as perfect truth. Domain 2 rewards the idea that findings need context, confirmation, and judgment before they become priorities. Patch and update language also matters because many vulnerabilities are reduced through software maintenance, but the vocabulary here has important differences. A patch is a change release to fix a flaw, close a weakness, or correct a problem in software or firmware. An update is a broader term that may include patches, improvements, and new features, while a hotfix usually refers to a more targeted correction released quickly for a specific issue. Versioning helps teams understand what release a system is on, while baselining helps them know what version or configuration should normally be present. Patch cycle refers to the regular rhythm by which systems are reviewed and updated, and maintenance window is the approved time when disruptive changes can be applied with less operational risk. Rollback plan is the way the team can return to a prior state if the update creates new problems, and testing environment is the safer place where updates may be evaluated before broad release. These terms matter because patching is not just a technical action. It is also an operational process that balances speed, stability, and risk reduction. Not every weakness can be fixed immediately, which is why mitigation vocabulary is so important in this domain. Mitigation is the broader concept of lowering risk even if the root cause has not yet been fully removed. A compensating control might involve access restriction, segmentation, application allow listing, stronger monitoring, configuration hardening, or temporary service reduction, so the vulnerable component is harder to reach or abuse. Hardening means reducing unnecessary exposure by disabling unused features, removing default accounts, tightening permissions, or changing unsafe settings. Isolation means keeping the vulnerable system or service separated so a problem there has less room to spread, while segmentation narrows how freely systems can communicate. Defense in depth is the idea that multiple protective layers should make exploitation more difficult, even if one layer fails. This group of terms matters because CySA Plus expects analysts to think practically. The best answer is not always to apply the perfect permanent fix instantly. Sometimes the best immediate move is to reduce reachability and buy time while a safer or more complete remediation plan is prepared. Application and web-focused vulnerability terms also deserve attention because many environments are heavily dependent on software that users interact with directly. Input validation refers to the practice of checking data before the application accepts or processes it, which matters because weak validation can allow harmful instructions or content to slip through. Injection is the broad idea that crafted input causes the system to execute something unintended, and command injection or structured query language, SQL, injection are common examples of that concept. Cross-site scripting, XSS, refers to script content being delivered in ways that affect other users, while cross-site request forgery, CSRF, abuses trust between a user and an application to trigger unwanted actions. Broken access control is the condition where users can reach functions or data they should not be able to reach, and insecure deserialization is the unsafe handling of structured data that can lead to unexpected code or logic outcomes. A beginner does not need to memorize a giant web catalog blindly, but it helps to hear that many application vulnerabilities are really failures of trust, validation, or permission boundaries rather than magic tricks performed by attackers. Configuration and infrastructure terms matter because not all weaknesses come from code defects. Secure baseline is the approved starting configuration the organization considers acceptable for a system type, while configuration drift is the gradual movement away from that approved state over time. Open port means a service is available for communication on a system, but unnecessary exposed ports create more attack surface than the organization may realize. Default credentials are built-in login values that should not remain in use. An insecure protocol is a communication method that lacks modern protections or sends sensitive information in ways that create avoidable risk. Internet-facing means a system is reachable from outside the trusted internal environment, which often raises priority because more threat actors can interact with it directly. Shadow information technology, IT, refers to systems or services created or used outside approved visibility and governance, which matters because hidden assets often go unpatched and unmonitored. These terms reinforce a simple truth. An organization can create major risk not only by running flawed software, but also by deploying, exposing, or maintaining ordinary systems carelessly. Another important part of Domain 2 vocabulary involves the timing and maturity of a threat against a weakness. 0-day refers to a vulnerability that is newly discovered or newly exploited before a fix is widely available, which usually increases urgency because defenders have fewer normal options ready. Proof of concept is code or demonstration material showing that exploitation is possible, while Exploit Kit is a packaged collection of tools or methods used to automate exploitation. Weaponization is the point where a weakness moves from being a technical issue on paper toward being something usable by attackers in a more practical way. Active exploitation means the weakness is not just theoretical anymore, but is being used in the wild against real targets. Threat feed enrichment may tell a team whether a specific vulnerability is trending across the industry, which helps with prioritization because popularity among attackers changes the meaning of exposure. The lesson here is that the same vulnerability can feel very different depending on whether it is obscure, newly disclosed, broadly weaponized, or already being abused against organizations like yours. Ownership and workflow terms are also central because vulnerability management only works when someone is responsible for action. A finding owner is the person or team assigned to track and respond to a vulnerability finding, while a system owner is accountable for the asset where the weakness lives. Service owner is responsible for the business or technical service the system supports, and those roles may overlap or remain separate depending on the organization. A ticket is the tracked record of work, status, and responsibility tied to the issue, while service level agreement, SLA, is the defined expectation for how quickly a finding should be handled based on severity or type. Escalation happens when action is delayed, risk is high, or authority is needed to move forward. Workflow is the path by which findings are created, validated, prioritized, assigned, addressed, and closed. Closure should mean more than simply marking a ticket done. It should mean the weakness was fixed, mitigated, accepted with formal awareness, or otherwise handled in a way the organization can defend and explain. The terms around validation after change are just as important as the terms around discovery before change. Verification is the act of confirming that the remediation or mitigation actually worked, while rescanning is one common way to check whether the finding still appears. Residual risk is the amount of risk that remains after controls or fixes have been applied, and understanding it matters because remediation rarely produces a world of zero risk. Regression is the unintended reappearance of a weakness or the creation of a new problem after changes are made. Change control is the process used to manage how modifications enter the environment, and approval is the governance point where the right people confirm that the change should proceed. Audit trail is the record of what was done, by whom, and when, which matters because vulnerability management needs accountability, not just good intentions. These terms help explain why mature organizations do not stop at discovery. They also track whether the environment actually improved, whether the change created other issues, and whether the decision-making around the fix was visible enough to trust later. As this Domain 2 glossary comes to a close, the most useful thing to carry forward is that vulnerability language becomes much easier once you stop hearing it as a collection of scanner words and start hearing it as the language of weakness, exposure, judgment, and response. Vulnerabilities are discovered, findings are validated, scores are considered, business context shapes priority, owners are assigned, mitigation or remediation is performed, and verification confirms whether the risk picture truly improved. That whole story is what Domain 2 is really describing. The best learners are not just the ones who remember what CVE or CVSS stands for. They are the ones who can hear a scenario and understand where the organization is in that vulnerability story, what the key term means in context, and why the next step matters. Once the vocabulary starts fitting together that way, Domain 2 becomes much more coherent, and the exam question stops sounding like isolated technical labels and starts sounding like practical security decisions you already know how to think through.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.